Gears 3D Motion Capture Studio here. Kevin Haime Golf School with son Jake. Jake, it's our last tip. This has been a fun thing. Jeff Botter and Scott approached us and said, let's do videos this year and kind of celebrate 25 years of tips in Flagstick. And we're down to the last 5 years. So we went 2019 with this tip.
Yeah, I think, capping it off with something like Gears 2 is a really, serendipitous thing. It shows how much, we've evolved and the industry involved and teaching has evolved over the last 25 years. Although it's shocking how much of the stuff actually stays the same when you learn more about it.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? There are many elements based on athleticism that are the same whether you're hooked up to a computer or not. But there are some surprises and some things we can really focus on. I've certainly learned over the last 25 years I've been doing these tips. I think the foundation of the way we look at the golf swing is still the same. I still teach the same type of motion, which I'm pretty proud of actually. It has stood the test of time. But when we got this in 2015, it kind of rocked our world for understanding and seeing exactly what's going on. It's very cool. I think, I can't even imagine, Jake, the stuff you know now. When I was your age at 29, I was basically teaching off my reputation as a player and not learning as I went, but compared to the knowledge we have today with force plates, pressure mapping, computer systems, 3D motion capture, very cool.
Yeah, it's safe to say that we're all getting smarter as golf pros, and it's an exciting time to develop as a teacher.
So I actually call it. I actually call it. And by the way, there's the is it May or June? I think it's May 2019 magazine front, and there's the tip we did in there using our Gears avatar. By the way, when you go through a 3D motion capture session, you wear a suit like this, right, which has all the markers all over it. And that captures you and then shows exactly what you're doing in a golf swing. So it's very exacting stuff. What do they say? 2 millimeters? It's precise within 0.2 millimeters. Precise the thickness of a sheet of paper, right?
Yeah. So basically, having a static motion capture system is the most accurate way to capture how a swing works. And one of the great things for us as a resource now, and what we use for the tip, is that between all of the different teachers that use Gears and Gears themselves, they've captured an incredible amount of data on Tour Pro swings now. And so they have a avatar model that is...
Yeah, this is him, right? The average avatar model.
The average tour player, and they update it over time, although it really doesn't change much if we're honest. I mean, the tour players are doing similar things.
Yeah.
But it updates over time, and it gives us exact info on what the PGA's tour players do themselves, because we have their models, and then on average, because we have this month.
All right, so 3 numbers this month. We chose 3 important numbers to teach people things, and if you focus on, well, you got to focus on everything in golf, but these 3 things are very important. So the first is spine angle, Jake, which we describe as the angle of the spine at address and throughout the golf swing. And the number we focused on in this column was 61.5, because if straight up and down is 90, this Tour Pro starts his golf swing. At the time, they have updated this. It was 61.5. For whatever reason, it's 59.6 here, but let's even call it 60 degrees.
Yeah, I think the thing to say is that most tour players are at 60 degrees, or you're slightly lower or slightly higher, depending on your posture and your proportions,
right? Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah.
But usually, it would be very rare to see a tour player outside of 3 to 4 degrees on either side of 60.
So what's the lowest you'd like to see? 54 maybe?
Yeah, 54, 55, and that would be an extreme case.
62 maybe at the top end, right? So most good players, as the pelvis moves back and the weight stays centered, the back's nice and straight. We're on this line. I believe mine is 58 point something, Jake, normally. And you're right, based on how long the torso is, how short the legs are, etc., it might vary a little bit. But here's the message of the tip. Let's bring this golfer up to the top, the PGA Tour average player, and we see he's 61.6, he was 59.8, so he's within 2 degrees of the same, and many of the players are in the exact same number, right? When we originally did this, 61.5, we matched it at the top, exactly the same.
Yeah, I would safe to say that a minimal amount of movement is what we're looking for. There is something to say about if the hips move forward or backwards at all, or anything changes, these numbers will change, because your spine is an axis with 2 fixed points, right? Your neck and your hips both affect your spine angle. So it's not surprising that there's a very small amount of movement but the point is that it's a very small amount of movement. And if you actually look at the model as he swings through the backswing, he hits the 61.6 number about halfway back and stays there through the rest of the backswing.
And then let's bring that Golf Pro videographer down here, and we're still in the low 62.1 there again, so we're still staying at address, or at impact, I'm sorry. Let's bring him through about 3/4 of the way through the golf swing, and at this point, a little more, a little further there. Let's test it, keep going, a little bit more. There we go, 61.8. So they're maintaining that line to swing around. If you think about it, everyone, if you want a propeller to move quicker, you want a fixed axis or axle in the middle, right? So it has speed and rotation. So we set our proper posture, and then we're working on just rotating in that posture as best we can.
And I think the thing to say with that is you'll notice that the avatar has their eyes turned through the golf ball. So this isn't a keep your head down point. This is a turn around your posture properly point. And it's an obvious part of their ball striking, why they move so little off that initial posture.
Yeah, we call it turning in posture, right? It's super important. Now here's the message for many of you. I'm getting a little older, in my 50s now. I've got a tight back hip. I actually struggle with a little bit of lifting a couple of degrees because I'm not turning into my hip properly. So flexibility and movement and even skeletal structure will affect this. But we'll see high handicappers change up to 15 degrees. And they'll start at 55 and then they swing way up trying to make a big golf swing happen. Then they dip down to the ball, then they're trying to lift the ball. So we'll see dramatic changes in spine angle. And the tip is, if you practice, and you can even practice at home just trying to rotate in posture back and through, you'll build a cleaner, better, more balanced golf swing, right?
Absolutely. I think we're not robots, so it's not surprising there's a incredibly small amount of movement going on with the Tour Pros too. But I think the thing to remember is, that keeping it to that small movement is why it works.
Yeah, think about that, everybody. If you go from address all the way to the top, all the way down to impact, all the way 3/4 of the way through before you stand up and finish, and you're within 2 degrees of total change, that's pretty fascinating. It's something to pay attention to and work on too. Okay, second number, Jake, is our right knee, our trailing knee, I guess we'd say, for all you lefties out there. And the fact that it not only stays flexed, and I was pleased and surprised at this when we saw this number, but it actually, in our original software update, I think it was 6 degrees more flex at the top than at address. 6 degrees in here for 2019. This guy's about 7.5. So in the new update, they're certainly not straightening the leg more, right? So let's explain the difference between, some people out there are saying, you got to turn into that back leg and it straightens, but it really doesn't straighten.
I truly think that straighten is poor word choice. I think that if you look at how your hips would move in golf, the more that you turn your hips into that back hip, or I'm sorry, your hips in general, your pelvis, into that back hip, the more this leg is going to extend as the pelvis orients itself on top of the leg. That being said, there's a very big difference between the legs stretching out and looking straighter from a certain perspective and actually getting straight.
Yeah, I think cameras fool us.
This is straight, but if you look at what I do when I turn, the more I turn my hips, yes, my leg stretches out, but if you look at it from the correct angle, my leg's still flexed, everybody.
Straighten your knee now. See the lock up there? So there's no straightening of the leg. I call it elongating. Same thing. As I turn into that hip, my leg elongates and I settle into that back hip. And I want to turn into that hip. I don't want to not turn and just keep my legs very fixed. I want to allow that loading into the back hip. But the knee just doesn't straighten up. We're there, and then you can see how much more I have if I do actually straighten my knee.
Well, and to that point, this is where some of the tip we were looking at, in the Flagstick tip comes from. If your, back pocket, your bum actually moves back as you turn, as it should, your knee's going to stay flexed because your pocket is moving away from your knee. And that's where we see a lot of the flex stay with the gear system. So if we bring the Tour Pro...
So let's bring the back to address, Lee, and just look. Or Lee, or just let it go. Lisa Haime is on the computer monitor, my videographer.
So you can see...
Way to go, Lisa, and boss, by the way.
You can see...
21.85.
In the right knee. So that's how much flex is at this joint here.
Now, a quick note on that, first of all. We've got a lot of beginners squatting at like 45 and 50. So 22 degrees of flex is athletic unlock, I call it. You don't want to get too bendy. But they start, this particular Tour Pro is at, or Avatar Compilation Tour Pro is 21.85 at the start. That's how much flex is in that knee. Very cool number. Let's bring that Tour Pro to the top.
So if you look at the number now, it's at 28.09 degrees of turn. So this angle has actually increased in terms of flex into the knee. And I think this is what's interesting to talk about, given both what was used to be taught as golf pros and what's, as the direction we're moving. You don't want to lock the knee down and not move, right? You need your hips to turn.
I would say I made that mistake early in my career. So many players swayed and so many people straightened that I told them to kick the knee in and keep it there. And I remember Steve Elkington even wrote a book. He was a great player, won the 95 PGA Championship at Riviera. He said his knee didn't move a single inch from where it started. And, we adopted that concept to really lock that down to prevent the sway and the lift. Now, I still think it's great advice to minimize motion down there.
As a feeling, not necessarily a reality.
Correct.
Right? And I think that what Elkington probably did in his book is he exaggerated his feeling to achieve something, put it on paper, and then it's like, well, my knee doesn't move, but if you watch it swing, it does.
Or pre-gears, right? In the 90s, pre-internet, believe it or not. I think the internet was invented in 94. He won in 95. So maybe there wasn't a total understanding of exactly what was going on there, right? So that's why this stuff's so cool.
So that being said, the thing to say about this is this, everybody. Your knee does move. As you turn into your hip, your leg does extend. There is a bit of an appearance difference. And if you try to lock it down and keep the number, you can't turn. So that restricting yourself isn't right. However, if you turn into your hip properly and maintain flex in the leg as a part of that turn, you will resist that turn, you will have a more efficient golf swing, and you will still allow that turn to occur, which makes you hit the ball harder.
Yeah, the feeling I tell people is if you lift and straighten, first of all, coming out of posture, so that's related to the first part of this tip, and the knee straightens, you don't have any leverage to move off the back leg and to get into your golf swing from, right? So the idea of lifting, I did a tip one time, I don't know who it was for, but I talked about, it looks like some golfers have helium in their sweater. They're kind of floating up. And whenever you want to be strong, you want to use the ground to be athletic, a quarterback pushing off to throw. And so you want to stay down in that leg, right? And that's where the ground force plates are interesting, too, to study how the movement works from foot to foot.
Well, and to that point, everybody, if the average tour player who's trying to maximize those ground forces has more rotation flexibility than most people, so is therefore rotating more, they still maintain that flex in that knee better than most amateurs. Clearly, it's what we're trying to do here, right? It's not getting rid of this reality just because you want to hit it farther. These guys are trying to do that already.
Number 3 number, let's look at our tour average avatar from the top here, videographer, and let's bring, first of all, a little note here, top of the backswing, these are all the numbers. The hips have turned about 39.4 degrees, well, exactly 39.4 degrees. We'll tell players 40 to 45 degrees, a nice amount of hip turn in the backswing.
I would say that's typical of most tour players.
Yeah. And double or more of shoulder turn. But let's bring that Tour Pro to impact. That was the other number we had here, which was 44 in this May 2019 article. This one's 43.7 rated impact, so very, very similar. But explain maybe, Jake, why that's so important and getting those hips clearing through impact.
Yeah, so I think an important part of the golf swing for various reasons is making sure you not only shift your weight towards the target to use your momentum and strength to hit the golf ball, but you then clear your body and turn through the golf ball, both to square up the club face, to add power, to add balance, to essentially have the whole thing come together.
And make room for the club.
Totally, and that's part of squaring the club up, right? So I think what happens to a lot of people is they assume that they want their impact to look how they started. That if they can return to the same position where they started their golf swing, it'll give them the most consistency of hit. And that's actually very far from the truth.
Yeah, it is far from. I don't know about most, but certainly the high handicappers and the beginners, many of them will say, I'll say, what do you think impact should look like? And they go, pretty much like a dress. And the reality is you want 65 to 80% of your weight on your lead leg as we call it covering or getting on top of the golf ball. And then we need to turn in order to make room for the club and bring it down in the proper path. So pros have their hips about 44 degrees open at impact, which is our cool third number. 6 degrees of knee flex increase, maintaining posture throughout the swing. and then about 44 degrees of turn. Now my number, I'm in the gear suit all the time, checking numbers, and Jake, 33 last week when I was in the suit.
On the good ones. Yeah, 33 on the good ones.
On the good ones.
No, but it was 20. We'll say 28 to 33 degrees, which is much more than you see the average person able to turn through the golf ball.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why that number is right for you is because there's a flexibility discussion to have here, right? You're only able to turn your hips open at impact as much as you can based on how much you can separate your shoulder turn and your hip turn. So obviously, 44 degrees of hip turn through the golf ball is a lot for most golfers, because most golfers don't have the ability to swing like a tour pro from a physical standpoint.
I would add to that you need to be a good enough athlete to square the club. So
Totally.
you can't get up here and just turn your hips as fast as you can and leave your arms back here. You'll never hit good shots. So
Very good point.
that's another element. If I'm not swinging as well, subconsciously maybe you're slowing things down a bit to find your timing and impact a little bit. So, you want to move quickly in golf, but bottom line is, let's get on the lead leg and let's understand that those hips should be well turned by the time we're hitting the golf.
Yeah, I think the goal is to be more open with your hips at impact than most people think. And if we can get you to turn your hips through the golf ball much, much more while keeping your chest relatively square to the golf ball at impact, I think it produces much better impact. And it's, again, a little different than a lot of people would assume they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I'd encourage everybody to use technology, to do this kind of thing. Anyway, that'll do it for today. Those are our 3 neat numbers. I want to thank Jeff and Scott and our whole team at Flagstick for 25 incredible years of teaching. I bet we never thought 25 years ago we'd be in front of a computer screen looking at an avatar in 3D, but here we are. It's very cool, and here's to 25 more years, everyone. And good job, Jake. Well done today.
Thank you.